Welcome to CONEXEC podcast. Today we're meeting with Don Tucker. Don is the president and owner of Spectrum. And rather than me, Don, giving your introduction, I think it's probably best for you to kind of talk about yourself and don't be too humble.
Well, I have every reason to be humble, so it's hard to do. I'm president and owner of Spectrum Contracting Services. Some days I think it owns me, but there's a thin difference between owning a company and a company owning you. But I'm very active in my company. I am at work every day, and I'm involved in the operations, the marketing, bidding, out on the site, some, especially out of town projects. And I'm generally just a very active president of the company. I don't sit in my office, drink coffee all day.
Well, Don, tell us about Spectrum as a company. But before you do that, can you go all the way back? And I know this is a long time to think because you're not necessarily a young pup anymore. But kind of go back to where you grew up and what'd you do? You know, how'd you get to where you are? That kind of stuff.
Sure, but you didn't have to say I'm not a young pup anymore. This is a podcast. Nobody can see.
That's true. That's true.
I grew up. I'm proud of where I grew up. I grew up in a little town called Rowley, Kentucky. It's in the corner of Adair County, about 14 miles from Campbellsville, about 14 miles from Columbia, and about 15 miles from Liberty, where three roads came together. Dad, right after the Army, getting out of World War II, he met my mom, and I was born. My mom was very young when I was born. We grew up, according to today's standards, we grew up poor, but we didn't grow up poor at all. My parents were very hardworking people. We always had plenty of food, and we always had clean clothes, and they gave us a phenomenal amount of guidance in terms of living a Christ-centered life, working hard, and understanding that we could accomplish anything that we were willing to work hard enough to accomplish. And there was no nonsense in our house when it came to school, studies. You made really good grades or you were in trouble.
So were you in trouble or not?
No, I actually made pretty good grades, but the smartest one in my family, I've got two brothers and two sisters, the smartest one in the family wasn't a very good student, and he stayed in trouble. But he had a high IQ and does really well. But a spanking a day was his repertoire growing up. My dad was a dozer operator, so at the age of 12 or 13 in the summer times, I sometimes would go to work with Dad and sit under a tree and watch construction being built. So I developed a liking for construction since I was very young. My dad used to joke and say I was going to go to school and become an engineer and going to give him a soft job. Well, part of that became true. I went to the University of Kentucky, majored in engineering and business, graduated, and when I started my company some years into it, I hired my dad as a superintendent. And he told me the only thing wrong with that dream he had is I didn't give him a soft job. I was harder on him than anyone else.
That must have been an interesting arrangement, having your dad work as a superintendent for your company.
It really was. My dad was a strict disciplinarian. If I scored 22 points in a basketball game, he wanted to talk about the two I didn't score. If I made all A's but one B, we only talked about the B. And I can exemplify that with a little bit of a funny story. We were building raceways beneath the Wolf Creek Dam in Russell County, which wasn't too far from where I was born. And my dad was a superintendent on that job. And we were there, and it was a big concrete job, and we were going over details. And I was fine tuning cost, and we were having a business discussion, and I was the president of the company, and he worked for me, and that role was well defined. At the end of that day, before I headed back to Lexington, he said, "Your mom would like you to come by and have dinner with us tonight." So I said, "Okay, I can do that." And I followed him in a pickup truck. I was driving a Corvette. And when I drove into his yard, the first thing he does is gets out and tells me I crossed the yellow line twice and criticized my driving. He went back to being a father. So we never had any problems with our roles. He was a phenomenally good superintendent, and I absolutely worship the man as my father.
Wow.
So I went to the University of Kentucky and got a good education. Tried to play baseball while I was there, but I couldn't do engineering and baseball both. Graduated, and the year I graduated was when they did the draft lottery, and I was one of the early numbers in the draft lottery, I think 7, if I remember correctly. So I was in the Army for a period of time and got out and went to work for White and Condon, who's now Condon and Hacker. I actually chose them. They weren't looking for anybody, and I did research and I liked them. I called Bob Conklin and asked him if he would be willing to interview me. And he said, we're not looking for anybody now. I said, well, I have a major in engineering. I've worked every summer in construction. That's how I put myself through school. And I have a business degree. He said, well, come and talk to me. So they created a position for me and hired me. And they were a phenomenal company to work for. And I worked for them for 6-7 years. One of my prime projects is Seton Building over in the UK. I was project engineer on that. I was 23 years old, I guess. And anyway, I just had a great relationship there and met. I was playing semi-pro basketball and met a guy that was a developer, and he taught me into going in business with them, and I did. And then from there, that didn't last too awfully long because the construction was supporting the development. And if you know a lot about development, you know you can't ever have enough money to support a developer. So formed my own company, and then later it got reorganized into Spectrum. And that's kind of my history. I'm married to a beautiful supporting lady, Marilyn Tucker, who I married late in my life. I was 40. For a period of time, I forgot how I was raised, and the only thing kept me from being a playboy is I wasn't tall, dark, and handsome. So.
Well, I was going to ask you, if you didn't get married till you're 40, is it you were just trying to push all the ladies away?
Well, I had an interesting life. I wish I hadn't done it. If I could do it over, I would undo it. But one of the cool things about being a Christian, the world, you may not be able to undo your past here in this world, but as the scriptures say, as far as the east is from the west, is our sins. And forgiveness is a great thing. And actually, I rededicated my life when I was 38 years old, and have tried to live as good a life as I can since then.
So tell us about Spectrum as a company. When did it start, and kind of how did it come around?
Well, Spectrum started in February 12, 1987. It came about through I don't know really exactly how to say this, but a business failure of sorts, I guess. It wasn't a business failure of sorts. It was a business failure. I had a company that was about 11 or 12 years old, and we had done some amazing work. We had used a joint venture relationship with a company out of Omaha, Nebraska to help us to grow. We built some very sizable projects. For example, the Moorhead Academic Athletic Facility in Moorhead, which is where they still play basketball to this day, which was probably equivalent to a $25-30 million project now or more. A 6-story library tower in Moorhead, and so forth and so on. And we had a good reputation, a good future, and I got involved with the developer from North Carolina and did several projects for him. In fact, saved him by being able to put the Holly Inn, which was a big wood hotel in Pinehurst, North Carolina, which is the golf capital of the world, I guess. He sold hotel rooms as condominium hotel room, and he did it through the SEC. And the deal was he had to put it in service on December 25th. I'm sorry, December 31st. And so we got involved when another company failed, and they had just done a little bit of exterior work. And long story short, from September the 4th to December the 31st, we had to put the hotel in service, and we did. Well, that was pretty much unheard of. So the reward was we started doing all of his work, and we let him get, we had back then a $42 million project on Hilton Head Island, and land was bought, tentative funding letters from the banks, and at that time Hilton Head went through, the island went through, was when funding became very, very tight, and there was a recession, and Hilton Head Island got hit hard. And long story short, we had a bunch of money tied up in that project and several other of this developers' projects, and he went broke and left us in a position that we had to reorganize our company and so forth. So that led us into Spectrum. We took our people and reorganized our company, changed some business philosophies and so forth, and that was February 12, 1987, and it's predominantly the same company today.
So really, what is the core focus of Spectrum? You know, if somebody asked you that question, and that could go a lot of different ways, but what would you say?
Well, this may be a longer answer than you want, and if it is, stop me. But I know from having a marketing degree that you should be able to define exactly what you do very quickly. And I can define what we do, but we're a very multifaceted contracting firm. Our mantra is the complete contracting firm. We're licensed in 13 states, and we hold an NASCLA national license. Our primary markets are divided up into divisions of our company, and each of these divisions has particular clients and are active in certain market segments. And the market delivery method is different for each of these divisions. So perhaps just a quick look at the divisions would explain who we are and what we do. One of our major divisions is the church division. We average a little over 50% of our volume every year is in churches. I think we've done 70-some churches now.
Wow.
98% of all of our churches, Spectrum is a design build contractor. We've negotiated those projects, and we're the preferred contractor. So those are all negotiated projects. The marketing strategy for our churches is we align ourselves with partners who specialize in financing churches, such as CFR, Christian Funding Resources, CDF, Christian Development Funds, and so forth. So they like us because we keep projects in budget. They'll tell you that we've never had a project that they've had a financial problem on. So, and then also word of mouth. Every church, we learned pretty early, talks to every other church. So if you solve a problem for a church, the word spreads. And that puts us in a position of having opportunities really across southeastern, really, I guess, the eastern part of the United States. So we travel a lot with that division. Of course, it's a two-edged sword. If you've got to be very aware of solving church problems, or if you don't solve the problem, that word will get out also. We also have a healthcare division. This volume varies from year to year based upon governmental regulation, tax structures, funding, certificates of need, and some of those things that drive the healthcare industry. It's probably 70 to 75% of the healthcare facilities are negotiated. and the project delivery method is design build. We travel over a substantial market with this division as well. We have worked as far north as Wisconsin, as far south as Bradenton, Florida, as far west as Wichita, Kansas, as far east as Avon, New York, North Carolina, which is near the Outer Banks. So, and that mantra kind of comes from, or that travel comes from having clients that we go wherever our clients go. And as healthcare providers have been bought out by larger companies, we've had the opportunity to travel a lot. So that's a big segment of our market. And then we have a division called commercial, which usually constitutes approximately 25% of our volume. Approximately 50% of it is negotiated projects, usually with about 50% of those being design build. And then we have about 50% competitive bid, where we're just a regular general contractor, or we've negotiated general contracts. We rarely travel out of state with this division. Marketing strategy has become well known on certain type projects. For example, car washes, Dairy Queens, and BurgerFis. So we have a presence in all those. In fact, we've got a developer wanting us to build BurgerFis in Baltimore, Maryland. I haven't said yes to that yet. It comes from becoming an expert in the corporate store recommending us. And most of those projects are a lot of them, at least 50% of them are probably commercial competitive bid project where we're the general contractor. Custom homes, another division, perhaps 7 or 8% of our volume. It primarily exists just to build housing for commercial clients that we have that want us to build for them. And although right before the 2008 debacle, we were building 10, 12 homes a year, very large homes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we saw that coming, and we owned a lot of lots, and we were fortunate. We were able to get out of them and sold 2 remaining lots that we hadn't built upon, and collected all of our money and walked out of there with a good operation. But we certainly got out at the right time for us. We actually built a project on Kiowa Island. When I say it's local, we built 2 residences on Kiowa Island for an owner here in Lexington. So, but we go where our clients go. And then our last division, and it's probably a little longer than you want it, is probably approximately 25 to 35% of our volume. And these are projects that are smaller in job size but complicated from an engineering or construction perspective. For example, the Fitchburg Furnace, which is a historical project in Ravenna, Kentucky, that was sliding down the side of the mountain. It's about a third the size of the Sphinx. Big, long, laid sandstone structure. Back, they tried to melt steel with wood and built this furnace, and so it was about to crumble. And they bid the job through the University of Kentucky, and there was only one bidder, us, because nobody else would tackle it. And we fixed it up, and from there, put a concrete buttress in, stopped the erosion and the slippage. And then they decided it was such a good project that the government did that we would actually fix part of the sandstone that had been damaged by somebody dynamiting it, trying to destroy it. And we actually mined the sandstone from a local place that the original sandstone was mined. These were in 1,200 to 1,800 pound pieces, and actually put them in place. So that was a very complicated project. It wasn't big in dollar volume, $500,000 or $600,000, but it was a very exciting, hard project. And that's what we do with our specialty division. So we do all this kind of work. Yeah.
Well, very rarely will you find a company that is diverse as you guys. When you talk about been there, done that, you guys have truly been there and done that, I wanted to ask you one question. When I was listening to you, I just thought, and you talked about the portion of business that works with churches, how, I think everybody listening to this podcast, and me and you know, construction has a bad reputation in a lot of ways for being unethical and having issues, and obviously there's some certain standards working with churches. How different is your company because of those relationships and the expectations working in that industry and your personal faith?
Wow, that's a great question. Hadn't thought. I thought of how we brought things to the church, but I hadn't thought how the church brought to us. But it has. And you're right about the reputation of a contractor, which I think a lot of it is, or most of it's unfair. States where you have to be licensed, it seems that contractors are held in higher esteem than they are in Kentucky, where to be a contractor you have to have a pickup truck and or a hammer, but you sure have to have a pickup truck. So you don't have to be licensed in Kentucky, which is, I think, very bad for the industry. I was at Southland one Sunday, and you'll get a kick out of this, and waiting for church to start. And I hear two people talking behind me, and one of them was a building inspector, and this gentleman was saying to the building inspectors, he said, "Well, how do you handle all these contractors that lie and cheat and they don't do anything right?" And the building inspector said, "Well, no, that's not true of most contractors." And the other guy pushed it farther, and he said, "No, I know." He said, "Contractors are just lowlifes." And the building inspector said, "Oh, well, I don't find that to be true." And about that time, as they do at Southland, they asked us to stand up and say hi to people around us. So I stood up and turned around to the gentleman behind me and introduced myself and said, "I'm a building contractor. I overheard what you had to say. And at first I was offended, but now I've decided, here's my business card. You need to meet a good contractor that's morally correct and knows how to build projects." So it was kind of a funny time. He was very embarrassed.
I can imagine.
Building I say building a church is like building a house, a custom home for 500 people. But it has to be only one custom home. So you have to understand the dynamics of church. They work off of contributed money. They work off of contributed manpower, other than the ministers usually. You know, you have chairmen of the board and stuff that do other things. So you got to understand that when they want to have a night meeting, it goes from 6 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night, and you've already put a work day in, that just know it going in and take your time and work through all the issues. And it's a remarkable symbiotic relationship working with churches. Some of the greatest pleasures I've gotten in my life is building churches. My wife wants me to write a book about building churches. And we have always had great relationships with churches. In fact, right now we're building a church addition in Tampa, Florida, that we built in 2011, and it's grown so much that we're back building an addition. It's a sizable addition. In Nashville, Tennessee, we're building an addition to a church that we built in 2012, and it's 2.5 times the original building. So when you keep getting invited back to these churches when they grow, and they keep telling other people about you, then you can grow your business. But the primary answer to the question I think you asked is you have to understand the dynamics of a church, and you have to be able to meet them with their dynamics. You can't rush into this just like a hardcore business meeting. And that has taught us, so your question, how has that helped our business, was taught us all more patience and more of a giving attitude, I suppose, in terms of giving of our time and giving of our knowledge and making investments in churches. And that's taught us to do that with other clients, which has helped us in the rest of our business.
And it seems to me that sometimes when you build a building for a certain group of people, I felt like this when I was building government facilities, you kind of develop a connection with that group of people, and having that greater good, building something for that greater good. And to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons that I chose to go into government contracting personally, is because I had that connection to the military myself, and it was important to me that soldiers and sailors have a good place to sleep and eat and be taken care of. And just like with you, I'm sure you feel the same way about about parishioners, that they have a good place to come and worship. So kind of changing gears here. What is probably the most significant event that you had that occurred that really shaped the business model that you have today?
Two events. One was a business failure. When I say it's a business failure, it wasn't we've already talked a little bit about it. It was a developer that we let get into us, and we couldn't get paid, and he went broke, and it forced a reorganization. And I'm an optimistic person by nature, and I'm an aggressive person by nature, in terms of I'm willing to work hard and I go after a lot. But it taught me, I had a business degree, so I knew this, but it re-emphasized, contracting is not just about building buildings. It's about the whole business. If you're not always contractually right, or you don't have good contractual forms, if you don't collect your money, if you don't keep up with cost and do all those other business principles, then the joy you get from building a building will end because you won't be able to continue to build them if you let the business go. So that failure also led to a greater success. I think the second thing is in 2000, I guess it was really 1999, I started developing I could tell I had some sight loss, and I'd always had excellent sight. I was a good athlete. I was still playing sports aggressively. In fact, I was first team All-State as a 40-year-old. And the next oldest first team All-State in Class A softball was a 28-year-old. So I was still very aggressive, still playing basketball, but I kept seeing blind spots and kept going to eye doctors and 20/20 vision. And finally, somebody out of Nicholasville, in fact, Dr. Music, diagnosed. He said, I think you may have RP. And they ran all the tests, and I did. Retinitis pigmentosa is a disease of the retina where your rods are damaged and you start to lose peripheral vision, night vision, and color vision. So I had to stop driving in 2001. And being legally blind, and you've had lunch with me, you have some difficulties getting around and so forth, has taught me to go from the very, very, very independent person that I've always been to being able to be dependent at certain times, but not ever being totally dependent, if that makes sense.
And that 100% does to me, because obviously the people on the podcast know that, I have a loss of my lower left leg. And it's funny that if you're kind of a proud person, how you can be brought to your knees fairly quickly by something like that, and how those experiences, and we talked about this, Don, how those experiences really change kind of who you are and how you see the world. I mean, for me, after I lost my leg, the world became a lot less about others and a lot less about me, so, and I know you kind of feel the same way.
But at the same time, once you get past the initial shock, I had a Porsche when it was determined I couldn't drive anymore. And that sounds like, well, so what? You had to get rid of your Porsche. But I had driven sports cars cars were a real thing to me, and I played sports, and all at once, my Dr. Music said, you need to start getting prepared for losing your sight. Now, fortunately, and I believe this is a blessing from God, I believe it from the bottom of my heart, although I have difficulties at nighttime, well, they make flashlights, very strong flashlights. In fact, I can't see very well peripherally. That's been a gradual thing. So I've gotten used to it. And in my office, you never know that I have an eyesight problem. But in other environments, it's difficult. But once I got over that initial shock, I don't think I was ever very angry, but I started reaching out. And my wife is just a wonderful, compassionate human being. And when I'm around her, I never even realized we got an eyesight problem. It's just an excuse to hold hands a lot. But and she's a service-oriented person, so she never makes me feel less than. She always pumps me up. And also I've had to rely on my assistant at work. An assistant can kind of do me in. They can walk me off the edge of a building or any of those kind of things. And I have to depend on people to drive me. And but being dependent on good people is not a real bad deal once you accept it. I think it teaches you about business too.
Well, and the fact is, especially in the business that we're in, we can never do anything ourselves. We have to do things in cooperation with others, So for sure.
Exactly.
How are you preparing for the future? Whether it's the future for Spectrum as far as industry, as far as future work. How are you preparing for the future?
I think we have 4 unifying principles that we founded at the start of our company, and we do these things religiously, and methods may change, but principles don't change so often, I don't think, in our industry. Our 4 unifying principles, the first unifying principle is to make our desired profit according to God's will and direction. Second unifying principle is to provide job security for performing employees. The third unifying principle is to provide higher compensation than the market for performing employees. And our fourth unifying principle is to provide enhanced style of life for performing employees, or life balance type situations. Those things are chronological too. If you do number 1, you make your desired profit, and it's according to God's will and direction, it will be morally correct. There will be integrity, and you'll have money to be able to honor your second commitment, that is provide job security for performing employees. We've only laid 2 performing employees off in our whole history. And one of those I hired back, and the other I offered to hire back, but she had a child and decided not to. But that was in 2008, and somebody flipped the light switch and things changed dramatically. And then we want to be able to provide money to pay our people well, the third unifying principle. And then fourth, we want to give them life balance. Well, if you do all 4 of those things, you're going to keep a good group of people around you. And I think that's your best hope for the future. You can take a good group of morally correct, skilled individuals with a decent client base, and you can accomplish about what you need to accomplish in this industry.
What skills and ability do you have personally, do you think that helps the business?
Well, I work hard. I've been around quite a while. As you reminded everybody at the start of this, I'm not a young pup. I beg to differ with you, by the way. I am a young pup. I've just lived a long time. I had a superintendent down in Nashville about 2 months ago made that comment, and I said, okay, we're going to do push-ups together. He quit at 10, and I did 50 for him, so he doesn't take me on anymore on those areas. I think I'm hardworking. I don't care how much talent you have. If you're not willing to work, talent will only carry you so far. I think Mark Twain said it's 5% inspiration and 95% perspiration. So I work hard. I'm pretty well educated. I have continuing education. I have license in 13 states, ASL, CLA, national license. So a lot of those states require continuing education. I'm a prolific reader, so I'm fairly well educated. A long time ago, I determined that law is not a way that you want to run your business, but it's something you better be in compliance with so you can run your business. And I almost have a law degree, and I've served as a consultant to lawyers on 35 projects, and I learned a lot in doing that to keep me from having to do that for Spectrum. But I have good working knowledge of law, and we practice it here. I've got a new project manager. He's really gifted. He just he won't be as legal as we want to be. He's light on contracts, and I keep talking to him. Well, we can talk to them, and this is not going to happen, or this is not going to happen. And it does happen in law. If something goes wrong, the first thing people do is try to work it out. But if you can't work it out because one party has caused a damage to the other, then law becomes a relevant governing factor. So we want to always be contractually right, and I have a good working knowledge of law. I'm pretty analytical, the engineering background, but having a marketing background and an engineering background, in engineering 1 + 1 always equals 2, and in marketing 1 + 1 never equals 2. So, those are two different degrees, but I'm analytical, but not to a fault that it's all numbers. You have to mix emotion and passion and your sense of judgment and all those things in with that, but I'm analytical. I've worked in multiple areas of construction. I worked my way through college, working long hours in the summer on bridges and highways. I've worked in building construction, and I've been out in the field. Because we've been a little company that became a decent sized company, I've worked in a lot of different aspects. I think it's a lot easier for me to go out to a job site and relate to a project superintendent than if I just started as a executive in the construction industry. And I think the last thing is I care. I just genuinely care about work. I care about people. I care about integrity. There's nothing about me that is, I'm not a very laid back person, I guess. I care too much.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I know every strength can be a weakness, but caring is what a lot of people, those are the type of people, in my opinion, you want to have on your side. But now, kind of changing gears here, and if you were to give advice to someone looking to get into our business and grow it, maybe somebody that's younger, or somebody that's just going, just worked in the industry that wants to open up their business, what kind of advice would you give them?
I think a little bit would depend on at what stage they are in their career. I started in the business for myself when I was almost 27 years old. And I had a really good job at White Collar. I just always wanted to be in business for myself, so I started too young. If I'd started at 35 or 38, if I'd stayed at White Collar and had another 10 years experience with them, it might have been easier starting. But I also might have gotten indoctrinated there and still been there to this day. So I think that to start a business, you're talking specifically a contracting business, you got to know about construction, but more importantly, if you're going to own the business and operate the business, be the president or CEO, you better understand business. Very few construction companies fail, as you know, Scott, because of building falls. They fail because of the inability to handle the business side of it or the law side of it. So I would encourage people to continue to study. If you haven't already studied, taking business courses, to continue to get educated in business. Formal education in business will allow you to analyze financial statements, cost analysis, be able to relate with your external CPA, be able to relate to bonding. Bonding is not about construction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about your financial statement. The 4 C's, 3 C's. You're going to get bonded by 10 to 20 times your net quick. So you better know what net quick is if you want to utilize all your bonding. And then I think the other thing I would encourage people to do is don't take the shortcut by assuming everything's going to be okay, and let that reflect in how you negotiate and write contracts.
What did you, good advice there. If you had to say, what a few of your biggest failures and biggest successes are as an individual, what would you say those were?
As an individual or as a company?
As an individual.
As a person, my acceptance of Christ as my Lord and Savior. Secondly, marrying Marilyn Morris Tucker, Marilyn Morris at the time. Third, being born into a family that was not wealthy, but hardworking and honest. Fourth was having courage to do what I think is right. And I think my biggest successes all come from that. And if I talk about projects, I mentioned the project in Pinehurst, North Carolina. To complete, this has been several years ago, to complete $10 million worth of work in 3 months is almost 4 months, I guess, is unbelievable. It took an extraordinary effort. I flew to Raleigh, North Carolina every Wednesday, and I was there from Wednesday to Friday until the project was complete. I had an arrangement where every subcontractor president had to be there in the trailer for that meeting. The owner had to be there, the architects, engineers. We had to make instantaneous decisions and get them documented. The successes business-wise are hard to measure. Some of the big projects, it's easy to say those are the biggest successes, but maybe one of the biggest successes I have is my vice president of construction's dad was the first person I hired, and my vice president of construction came to work here when he was 17 years old with his father, went back to school for a couple of years and didn't really like school, came back to work for us and started out as a laborer, carpenter foreman, lead man, project supervisor, estimator, purchaser, vice president of our company. He's homegrown. He's gone from being a laborer to being vice president of construction. And we're not compromised in that area either. He's a very effective vice president of construction. In fact, today he's in Nashville, Tennessee. We've got a difficult, large truss girder erection that has to be supported by wood trusses on each side, and there's mobile cranes set up, and all that. So he and other people like him, we've got 3 or 4 of them in our company like that, that maybe the people are my greatest successes.
Well, that's pretty impressive to bring somebody in at a junior level and then them run the business. That is pretty incredible, and it's a testament to the fact that that just doesn't happen. You have to invest in those people, and obviously you've invested in him. Otherwise, he couldn't be who he is today. So it's a two-way street. It's a joint effort. So I have before I do kind of the speed round at the end, I had one last kind of open-ended question, and that's it. That is, we have a group of people that listen to this podcast that are junior members in the construction industry, and they're trying to position themselves to be an executive someday in construction. What advice would you give to them? They're young, they're motivated, they may be mid-level career. What advice would you give to them to attain an executive level position within construction?
I think the first thing they would need to do is define to themselves what they want to achieve. In other words, do you want to be a senior project manager? You want to be a vice president? You want to be president of the company? You want to own it? And do you want to do it within the company you work, or do you want to go out and start your own? If you want to go out and start your own, I think that you need some good mentors. Find somebody that you, or multiple people in the industry that you believe are trying to do it right, and seek their guidance and investment. Most people will do that. And then be prepared to work hard. I don't care how good an athlete you are, if you don't work hard, you won't ever achieve what you need to. Understand that work, and that's kind of a dirty word in our society now, is work. But work used to be something that was pride. I take great pride in my ability to work. But if you're willing to work hard, then I think you need to understand that there's going to be successes and failures. And I think you have to celebrate the successes. We always do that here. If we are low bidder on a job, we might high five each other, or we always go to lunch together. We do something to celebrate the victories. But we also, we don't spend much time dwelling on the failures. Acknowledge it, figure out what went wrong, and then immediately put some steps into place so it won't happen again, and then forget it. If you spend a lot of time thinking about what's wrong, you won't think much about how to do it right. I think a good analogy, I was a pretty good athlete all my life. And I took up golf late in my life when my eyesight problem developed. And first thing I did is I got lessons. I thought I'll just learn all the technicalities. And what I found myself doing was when I hit the ball not the way I wanted to, I was always thinking what I did wrong with the shot. So the next time I was ready to hit the ball, I was thinking what I did wrong with the last shot, and I never got very good. And one day it kind of came to me, epiphany came to me, don't think about that. You know how to hit the golf ball. Whenever you're going to hit a shot, think about how to hit it. Don't think about the shot you just hit wrong. And I think that's true in business. If you dwell so much on when you have failures, and every business owner has failures, you figure out what went wrong, you develop systems, and then you go with it. And last, I would recommend that you analyze yourself and find out if you're someone that can handle stress without becoming stressed, if that makes any sense. My wife says, it's kind of funny, I had a hard day and we go home and she said, honey, I'm just so sorry that you have stress like this. And I said, yeah, I'm stressed to the max. And I said, why don't you get that blood pressure machine out? or cupped out, as you did, and my heart rate was 62 at that moment, and my blood pressure was 118 over 70. And I said, as you can tell, I'm stressed out. So she smacked me upside the head and said, I don't see how you do it. She said, no, I know. I take all your stress, so you don't have it anymore. But there's people that can handle stress, and there's people that can't. And if you can't handle stress, becoming the owner of a construction business is going to be difficult for you.
Well, there is no faint of heart in construction, that's for sure.
Right. But it's also the ability to understand that what's bad, what appears to be bad, may not really be bad. You got to wait for tomorrow or the next day. Some of the things that's happened in your life that you think are bad, I'll bet you, if you go back and look, they turned out to be good. So I think you just have to have a balanced life, and with that, you care about your work immensely, and you're willing to put everything into it. But once you put everything into it, you've done what you can do. Things happen the way they happen.
The funny thing. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, my business failure did not come from not making money. It did not come from not being able to build buildings. It came from the lack of being able to collect the money that we'd already earned.
Well, the funny thing about what you say, the lessons that you learned is you have to have a lot of miles behind you in order to learn those lessons, and less miles ahead of you. So by the time you figure them out, you have less time to do it right. But that's why I always think it's good to, as you say, to have a mentor, someone who can guide you. Although learning through the school of hard knocks is an effective way, not the most efficient way, but effective. So
I respect you immensely, but I would argue that is not the most effective.
Well, not the most. Okay, yeah, that's. I guess the word is probably incorrect. It's. Go ahead.
It's just experience. If you have to experience doing things wrong a lot, you won't be able to survive to do it right. What I think you learn three ways. One is by experience, obviously. The second is through the experience of others, through mentors and reading, and you learn without the pain there. And the third is theoretical thinking. And the one talent I probably have, I may not have very many talents, but one of the talents I have is I'm a good theoretical thinker. If you can take somebody else's problem or whatever and extrapolate how this could happen to you, and you can guard against it before it ever happens, you do not have all the pain. So I'm a big proponent of theoretical thinking, forensic thinking, or however you want to call it.
And that's a hard thing. That's the thing I struggled with when I went from doing the business or doing the task of a business and to running a business. That, to me, that was a hard transition, because you do a lot of that analytical thinking, that theoretical thinking, and that is a lot more challenging because there's a lot less results immediately, and I don't know how you are, but most people in construction like the tangible aspect of construction, and it's tough when you spend the majority of your day just thinking on items and that are big picture items. So I want to go to the last round. It's called the speed round, and this is where you get to rate different topics based on a 1 to 10 basis. So 1 being the least important and 10 being the most. And all these could be 10, but I'm going to give you some different topics and ask you to rate them. So like I said, 10 is the most important. So we'll start off with scheduling.
I would rate scheduling 8.5 to 9.
Estimating.
10.
Contract.
On bid day, you you cannot make up for a bad bid. You can make up for a bad schedule, but you cannot make up for a bad bid.
Contract administration.
9.
Design.
9.
Contracts.
10.
Accounting.
9.95. 10, in other words.
Like David Dean likes to say, selling work or business development.
Well, without clients, you have no business. I think it's a 10 as well.
And the last but not least, leadership.
Oh, I think leadership has to be a 10 also. Companies don't do well without effective leadership. I think distinguishing between management and leadership is important as well. I think as Benning said, managers do things right, leaders do the right thing.
And with that, Don, I'm going to give you a chance to kind of close this out. I do want to tell you that I appreciate your time. One of the things I love about doing these podcasts is, I learn a lot. I learn a lot from experience of some pretty knowledgeable folks. It's amazing to hear people's stories and kind of where they came from. And I think if you were to ask our audience what they get from this the most, the consensus of the audience would be to understand people's perspective and why they believe what they believe based on who they are, whether that may be you growing up in a small town, joining the Army and, going to University of Kentucky or say anybody, David Dean, growing up and going to, in a small town, going to Eastern Kentucky. And it's just incredible to me, like, especially in this area in general. Not every one of our podcasts are in Kentucky, but the Midwest, you talk about work ethic, as Denzel Washington says during his commencement speech, he goes, hard work works. Working hard is what successful people do. So I want you to close it out, Don, and say anything you'd like to say to kind of close out this podcast.
Well, it's been fun. I'm always willing to share what I have. I think one of the difficulties I have in a session like this is that we have been around for so long and done so much in terms of different kinds of projects and so forth. And there's so many stories to tell that I'm probably should have been a little more focused on maybe some technology or some of those kind of things. But I agree with what you said. The character of the people involved is what makes something go when nothing else is going. The ability to dig down into yourself, along with good teammates that have the same capabilities, allows you the opportunity to fix what's wrong and prepare to be right tomorrow. And I think that if you don't have that compass that points to true north, you can't handle when problems come. And I think business owners, in fact, probably if my wife listens to this podcast, she'll probably be irritated that I spoke about the business failure. Well, I'm not shy about that business failure. I wish it hadn't happened, but it did. And it's part of what made me and Spectrum who we are. So none of us are ever beyond the ability to fail, and none of us are beyond the ability to take the failure and turn it into a positive thing that reaps benefit after benefit. And it's amazing. I think that we shared when we were having lunch, both our wives have had breast cancer. Some people take cancer and don't ever want to talk about it again. Some people take cancer that survive, and they want everybody that has cancer, they want to be the first person there to tell them you can survive. And I think that's true with business failures and business successes. It's easy to talk about the successes. It's harder to talk about the failures, but it's through the failures is when we learn.
Well, Don, I want to thank you once again. On top of respecting you and your company and what you guys stand for, I really enjoy talking with you always. It's always you gotta if you want to hear a good story, talk to Don Tucker. That's what I tell people. So you have some good stories about things that occurred, and you want to learn something. So I really appreciate that, and I want to commend you for what you do every day, and because you stand for a lot of things that I stand for, and it's tough sometimes. It's not easy, and I can't commend you enough for that. I also want to commend you for thanking your wife, because I know that's tough. No, I just she would disagree. No, you work with your wife. I work with my wife. I know it can be tough, so I want to commend you. I want to commend your wife for willing to work with you. But once again, thank you so much, and Don, it's been a pleasure to have you here today, and kind of close the podcast out. This podcast is for construction executives or aspiring construction executives to learn through mentoring and discussion. So I hope you join us next week when we'll have somebody else on to go through some of these common issues and kind of tell their story. So with that, have a good day.